Here's a poem worth returning to again and again. It's Wendell Berry, Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front. Maybe you know the poem. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbors and to die, and you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. So friends, every day do something that won't compute. Love the Lord. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who doesn't deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all who cannot understand. Praise ignorance. For what man has not encountered, he has not destroyed. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that profit. Prophesy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to Carry On. Put your ear close and hear the faint chattering of the songs that are to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. So long as women do not go cheap for power, please women more than men. Ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Go with your love to the fields. Lie down in the shade, rest your head in her lap. Swear allegiance to what is nighest your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox, who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection. What a poem here. What a poem about going in the opposite direction. What a poem about a value system that's not ordered by our phones and by slogans and signs and profit-making structures. It's a poem that's rooted in a kind of earth consciousness, a kind of resurrection consciousness, a kind of God consciousness. What is the largest picture we can possibly imagine, and how would we inhabit it? I guess I've been thinking about this poem over the last week or so. It's been a challenging week. I don't know what it's been like for you the last couple of weeks, with just the continued onslaught of politics and violence and finger pointing and name calling and scapegoating and threats and disdain and resentment. I mean, it's like the only food we're consuming at the moment. it struck me the other day that maybe I'll just say it in a plain way without a lot of caveats, but a kind of middle path is probably the most radical position one can possibly take in our present culture, that only worships at the altar of extremes and of self-righteous posturing and of such certainty around who's evil and who's not, and who's good and who's not. And, knowing that each of us carries darkness in our own heart. And knowing that even the darkest among us have moments of love. Knowing that everything we have in terms of our own little small individual self on this planet, on this earth, in this world is gift. Even our freedoms here that have been anything but the norm in ancient cultures. We inherited. And I'm a student of history. That's where I've spent most of my, formal education, really. And so I'm not naive about, I don't know what to call it. I just thought of a biblical phrase, the sins of our fathers. And so I'm not naive about that, but there's something like kind of uncomfortable in this poem about where he says, denounce the government and embrace the flag. Like, there's like a tension there. Like, of course, everyone wants to denounce the government right now. And just, if you're not doing that, just wait, in a couple of years when the election cycle turns over, and then you'll be all about denouncing the government. But it's like, what is he really saying here? I mean, I think it's a poem, again, that's speaking from a different place of consciousness, but to embrace the flag, I mean, what? Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands, the kind of freedom that values life and love and the world and humus and forests and the harvest and laughter and joy, these kinds of things. His two questions in here about the future, I find relatively haunting. You've probably heard that Lakota, or it might be Cherokee, someone can correct me here, phrase where there's an attempt to make decisions in the community of elders that affects the next 7 generations. That kind of way of thinking is dying off. We can barely think in 7 weeks or even 7 days or 7 hours at times. And he's asking such a question. He's saying, ask yourself this: will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Like the utter vulnerability and sacred naivety it takes to bring a child into this world and to love a child and to create a certain kind of nest and to want your child to go out into the world. Talk about courage. Ask yourself, are your choices, are your words, I'm asking myself, are my choices, my words, my stance, my place, the kind of world that I'm co-creating? Is it the sort of place that will satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Or is it about me, and my fickle wants and tastes and fears? And will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Merton talks about sleep as being just this utter surrender to almost infancy, childlike infancy. Like we're utterly, utterly vulnerable while asleep. And yeah, what kind of world do we want to live in? to co-create. And I've been thinking about how, not that I'm going to tell you in this podcast how to co-create. I'm just kind of speaking mythically and poetically here for a few minutes, hoping this poem will do its work. But I've been listening to some Martin Shaw, and he used an interesting phrase a few months ago that struck a chord with me. He said, in this age, in the age we live in, we need to make a covenant with limits. First of all, covenant, talk about old-fashioned biblical language, an agreement, a binding agreement of some sort, which involves a lot of will and consciousness and attention. A covenant with what? I mean, because the kinds of covenants that are being peddled on the market and in our culture often have to do with rights and freedoms. And I want to make a covenant with freedom. I want to make a covenant with my rights. I want to make a covenant with my tribe, my ideological position. And what an odd twist to say something like, we need an agreement with limits. And I think within this is something very old, is something that our great elders, our grandmothers and grandfathers and storytellers and mystics and teachers and poets, the great wisdom lineage has always said, and their voices are still echoing down the canyon of time, which is something like this: true freedom rests in limits. That's always been the path. It's like, it's like the Karate Kid. I want to learn karate, and he says, paint the fence. And that kind of discipline we hardly have a relationship with at all anymore, except maybe, if you're training for a race, that's allowed. That's a kind of, if you're on a certain regimented exercise routine, those are limits we can impose that are culturally acceptable. And maybe you can think of a few more that are culturally acceptable, but for the most part, I think modern people have an allergy. They think that freedom is the absence of limits, the absence of borders and boundaries. In fact, borders and boundaries and limits are thought to be cultural constructions meant to constrain our own natural, innate, totally free self. And thus, if we remove them and tear them down and mock them, we'll be truly free. But look around, who's free these days? I mean, we're possessed. We're possessed by our own passions. We're possessed by our own ideas. Half of them aren't even our own ideas. They're just things we read that make us feel a kind of certain affect, a kind of emotional fervor, and that equals truth to most of us, myself included, to get caught up and tied up in who's ever saying the loudest thing in the most passionate way, So it's that kind of world, and even in the spiritual realm, it's like really old-fashioned things like prayer and fasting. I want to talk about fasting in a minute, but prayer and fasting and going to church, having a sangha, a community, a regular community, set times for prayer, repetition. These are all they're like so boring, and limit our freedoms. That's what we tell ourselves. And freedom for what, My spiritual director was saying something to me the other day, and I'll kind of paraphrase, but he was saying something. I was talking a bit about this phrase, covenant with limits, and he said it's kind of like, it's really, really hard to work for somebody else, to be under the thumb of someone else's timetable and schedule and routine and expectation. And who doesn't know that? It's like, Bob Dylan, we ain't going to work on Maggie's farm no more, with all the rules, and but he said, but it's hell to work for ourselves. And I mean, he wasn't putting down self-employed people. I've been more or less in and out of that realm for many years, and not presently, but that's not what he meant. He meant if the only one we are consulting in the end is our own whims and tastes and fantasies and desires and the way we think it should go, mainly the egoic self and its self-protected and self-defended sense of itself, we end up not being all that free, and and so I've been letting this work on me, and I just got back from an Animus program, which we call the Animus Quest. And it's an 11-day program. It's intense. It's an intensive. And it's a beautiful ceremony. And right in the middle is a 4-day fast and a 3-day solo. I can think of almost nothing more counterintuitive and countercultural and even in the spiritual realm than a fast at the moment and a solo. Because guess what? Guess what you carry with you into the fast? Well, all your junk and all your glory kind of at the same time. There's really no place to hide, and you will get bored in the first 25 minutes. But that's a kind of temporary covenant with limits. I'm not going to consume. And you know this. I mean, I'm not saying anything that's surprising, that we live in a consumer culture. It's like to consume is really almost the only form of meaning we have. And so even to say, I'm not going to consume what I need most essentially to be a vibrant, alive human being like everyone else, like every animal, like every plant and animal, to take in nutrients, I'm gonna make a covenant here. I'm gonna make a pact for 4 days and set it aside, and see what happens and wait. Like T.S. Eliot says, wait without hope, because we'll be waiting for the wrong kind of things, the wrong kind of hope. So we wait, and we listen. It's really it's like learning again the art of listening. And what are we listening to? The world, to the mystery. Almost the first thing that happens in a fast is that cacophony of self-protective voices and programs and ideas and strategies and identities. They all like take a front row seat at the table of your mind and start chattering away, talking you out of it or talking you into it, that you're some sort of spiritual guru now, and inflation, deflation, these cycles. It's like to withstand that, that's probably why the monks and nuns in the desert tradition in Christianity, largely in Syria and in Egypt, called it the afternoon demon. You sit there long enough and the afternoon demon pulls up a chair and starts chattering away, And on a fast, on a solo, on a fast, you don't have the 27 billion ways to get out of that temptation, that conversation, that wrestling match. You can't hit the eject button. You might try. You might dig out your buried, turned off phone in a plastic bag at the bottom of your backpack and check Instagram. But the hope is that you wait, and that you fast, and you empty yourself. You pour yourself out. You pour out who you think you are. And that's a limiter. And strangely, I've been a part of these kinds of wilderness programs for a long time now. It never ceases to amaze me that something enters that we would not expect. Pleasant or unpleasant, but a door opens, a trap door opens to something else, to a way of seeing the world, of being in the world, to taste something. What does Isaiah say? To taste bread that does not rot, Or one of the best lines in the Gospels, they come to Jesus after being in town for a while, and they ask him if he wants some food, and he says, "I have food you know nothing about." That's someone speaking out of a fasted consciousness, who knows what it's like to taste bread that does not rot, and is feeding on a kind of source. And interestingly enough, that seems to come by making a pact, a covenant with limits. Like Wendell Berry says, so friends, every day do something that won't compute. It's not from the calculated mind. And I've been feeling limits too, because if you didn't listen to my last podcast, I said that to my great surprise, I've come back around to church work again, and I'm the associate minister at Mayflower Congregational Church here in Grand Rapids. You should definitely come visit. Amazing music, really gracious staff I work with, and real multi-generational community. It's such a little treasure here in Grand Rapids that I knew not that much about. So really pleased and surprised. Couldn't have planned my life if I tried. Definitely not. And also it's a limiter. I said, well, I can't remember if I said on this podcast, I've been saying to a few people, hey, it's worth coming and checking out, because at the very least, you'll get to see me in a robe, an all-black robe. This is from the Protestant tradition of these funny, puffy sleeves and kind of looks like a graduation gown. And, it's a very old and sacred kind of mantle one puts on so as to disappear, which is kind of the opposite of the sort of preaching I have done in the past. No, it's disappear. And I've been having to stand in this little tiny octagonal pulpit and not move. I'm used to just pacing around, and that's the kind of teaching I'm used to, and it's been a limiter. And I mean, this is just one example. I can give you dozens of the ways I'm feeling my own limits. Yeah, I don't have the kind of freedom I had before, and yet I feel a little freer, and I'm not sure why. Except to say that's the mystery of this kind of ancient wisdom. That's my sense anyway. It's kind of ancient wisdom, and so I guess I want to ask some questions and invite you to use your imagination. What does it look like to make a covenant with limits? And you can say, well, I don't want to. I would say, okay, fair enough. You don't want to. But I'm at least trying to take Martin Shaw's challenge at face value. Yeah, okay. What else? Not just like the easy thing like, well, they want me to wear a robe at church and I just check that box. No, what else? What about the Sabbath? What about Shabbat? I was just talking to a friend in Israel, and he was saying, I went and saw, mutual friends of ours, and we had Shabbat dinner together. And I just remember that time period in my life, those few years living in Jerusalem, and how powerful Shabbat was. And everything closes down, and the streets shut down, and you go to someone's house, you go to your family, you pour wine, you light candles, you sit. Nobody's on their phone, and on Saturday, people are out walking, just walking in the streets, walking on the sidewalks. Not everyone. I mean, of course, various degrees of how seriously to take Shabbat, but it was woven into the fabric of Israeli culture, and that's been part of the Christian and Jewish heritage from the beginning. Except, we don't need that anymore. What about a Shabbat? What about a limit? What's that look like? What would it look like? One of the great lines from Richard Rohr is, we don't think our way into new, what does he say? We don't think our way into, now I'm not even going to get it, into new ways of living or something like that. We live into new ways of thinking. I think I got it. We don't think into new ways of living. We live into new ways of thinking. And it's a reversal. So you have to practice the Shabbat if you want to live into another mode of being and another mode of consciousness and another belief system. It's not a matter of believing it at the beginning. I believe in Shabbat. It doesn't even make any sense. It's just like, nope, some limits crack open the door of freedom, and that's one of them, at least in my view. Is it that kind of era? Or what about praying, keeping the hours? I've gone through. I have a really uncomfortable relationship with prayer for complex reasons. I probably talked about it here or there on the podcast. Some of it is that I grew up with a kind of vending machine God, and so it's like, oh, prayer is like, am I plugging in coins and hoping to get the kind of special treat from the vending machine? That doesn't seem right. But talk about a limited view of prayer. That's my own limitations speaking right there. And but kind of modes that can deepen even what we think prayer is, like lectio, like reading or meditation and reflecting on, and maybe Guido's ladder: lectio, meditatio, oratio, contemplatio. This is sacred reading and meditation, but kind of chewing on is what he means, and prayer, uttering something, oratio, and contemplatio, which is the absence, the void, the abyss, the ceasing of all words and thoughts and images, and resting. Okay, that's not a vending machine, God. We've left the planet, that whatever that thought was born on, and but that requires some limits. It's not more interesting, I know, from the power of addiction, but it's more interesting in a sense to open your phone in the morning. And for me, it's Facebook Marketplace, just that's my go-to addiction. And that's never satisfying. It's satisfying in the sense that it's always refreshing. Oh, look what else some moron is selling. For too much money or not enough, and whatever. Probably shouldn't be calling people morons, but I guess I'm the moron for thinking this is going to provide some sort of direction for my day. And yeah, so the limit is saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to return to, it doesn't have to be prayer in the traditional sense. I do think maybe every age there's a fresh wind that comes into the spiritual path. I think it has to hold hands with forms and ancient expressions for it to have some real depth to it. But you might have to find your own way, but it requires a kind of covenant, all right, I'm going to limit myself here. That's the way a good marriage or good friendship is too. And a good marriage is a friendship, but it requires, in a sense, commitment and a kind of exclusivity. Even if you have some, different definitions of what these words might mean in a given relationship, but it's not the opposite. The opposite means you don't really have a friendship or a marriage or a long-term commitment if there aren't limits. I want everything from you. I want a totally passionate, totally fulfilling relationship, and I want to do whatever I want, It's just not going to work. Even the natural world itself, much of my own spirituality it's probably just true on the unconscious level for everyone, but is shaped by the natural world. I was way more comfortable as a kid being outside than I was in church, and maybe that's true of every kid. That doesn't make me special. But the natural world is where I felt at home, and it too has its limits. The sea, this far you shall come, but no further, and the cycles and things are just beginning to turn here in Michigan. There's a limit here. You can't have the full blast of the erotic summer pouring itself forth year round. It's just too much. There's an end, there's a limit. And that's what the times of day and the seasons, speak to us about the covenant, that the covenant with limits that is the world that we inhabit. I don't know what it looks like for you, but I guess I'm offering a kind of challenge, like, I don't know, what do you think? Where does freedom come from? How free are you? Is it your experience that if you tear down all borders, boundaries, rules, norms, and limits, you're free? Are you really that free? Is that the nature of your own experience? Or is it true when there's a kind of consent, a kind of surrender, a kind of limiter, that a kind of mysterious opening? Maybe that has more to do with inner freedom than even external freedom, but a kind of freedom, a spaciousness of heart and soul is possible. It opens up. It speaks to us. I just thought of something I heard from Ian McGilchrist. Maybe you've been following his work the last few years. If not, you should definitely check him out. And particularly The Master and His Emissary. He has a new book out that I haven't dove into. It's a beast of a work. So, but one of the things he talks about with the kind of left brain, right brain phenomenon that makes us fully human is that in order to access the other half, the meaning-making, mythic and poetic dimension of our humanness, the right brain. He says there's not a list of things that need to happen. It's like the calculative mind. If we take that approach to opening up the pathways and channels to the other hemisphere, so to speak, it'll never work. He says actually what we need is boredom, space, and emptiness. That's making a covenant with limits. And strangely, in that space of boredom and emptiness, when that begins to open up, it's like suddenly it's filled with what we don't expect. And instead of sort of consenting to boredom, space, emptiness, we try to fill this void with everything we can possibly think of. And you know exactly what I mean. I don't even have to explain. It's an absolute fire hose and gluttony of options and choices and people, experiences, intensities, and distractions. So we have to be like a mad farmer and say, I want to cultivate a different kind of field. I want to cultivate a different place in the forest. Or like Teilhard says, I want to leave the zone of the known, of who we are, of who we think we are, and what makes sense, and go toward the senseless. Let me just look at my notes here. I made a couple notes. Then maybe I'll read the poem again. I didn't want to make too long of a podcast here. But maybe I want to say a few things about the Jesus story. It's been fresh in my mind. I guess it's one thing returning back to sermons. It's like we follow the lectionary, and so I'm regularly confronted by these gospel passages, and I've been thinking a bit about Jesus fasting, and it's pretty obvious that there would be no what we would think of as ministry without these 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, without what the New Testament later calls kenosis, or self-emptying, a pouring out, a real seeking it. And it says the Spirit, the wind, the ruach, the pneuma, takes Jesus out to the wilderness where he fasts, where he waits, And that's not the only time that sort of thing happens in his life. It's not like a one and done thing, a checklist. Oh yeah, I did my fast and now I'm just good to go. But there's this back and forth, you see, where there's engagement and connection and challenge and healing and teaching. And then it says he withdraws to eremos topos in Greek, a solitary place, a lonely place. Again, it's that kind of radical middle path that I sense that Jesus inhabits, and that's our model, you know. It's a symbolic model. Maybe you don't consider yourself a follower of Jesus or a Christian, or maybe you were a Christian, you're not so sure anymore. I don't know. But who would deny the power of the Christ figure, you know? And the challenge, it's like, it's a great turning upside down of values, like a mad farmer, you know, the mad carpenter, the wild Galilean. That's my favorite name for Jesus lately, the wild Galilean. So we've been given a tradition of limits, and something of our own consent is being asked at the moment. The way of subtraction, we might call it, the left-handed path, the path of kenosis, the way of lament, the way of the desert, the apophatic, even the dark night. These are all clues that another way of being awaits, and in the emptiness of waiting, in the emptiness of limits, the possibility of being found, of being touched, of being opened, of being filled, waits in the luminous void, so to speak. Where else can we learn what Jesus says in the wilderness, that human beings don't live on bread alone? I mean, the only way you can possibly learn that is by not stuffing your face, or I should speak to, I'm not saying you, I mean me, like by not stuffing ourselves with every form of available distraction, even the ones that we think are, like we're a quote on the right side of history, whatever that means. You can't really be a historian and use that phrase seriously, but even causes that we think are justified and urgent, in the cacophony of noise, that there's a time for action and a time for empty. It's the fasting and feasting dynamic, both at work. This is as far as I want to go today. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbors and to die, and you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. Just open your phone, I'm adding. So friends, every day do something that won't compute. Love the Lord, love the world, work for nothing. Choose limits, I'm adding. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who doesn't deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag and hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. Praise ignorance, for what man has not encountered he has not destroyed. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium, plant sequoias. Say your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that prophet. Prophesy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to Carry On. Put your ear close and hear the faint chattering of the songs that are to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful. Though you have considered all the facts, be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. So long as women don't go cheap for power, please, women more than men, ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman to bear a child? Will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Finally, go with your love to the fields. Lie down in the shade, rest your head in her lap, swear allegiance to what is nighest your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, think AI, think algorithm, lose it. Lose your mind. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection.